Wednesday, the 3rd of August 2022. In this Skidmark, I want to talk about Yemen. It is a place that I'm quite sure most of us may have heard of it, but very few of us really understand what is going on there, and the media is not paying any attention to what is going there. All that you see is here and there a little snippet of information. And since the Ukraine expedition started, I have noted on the sources that I use that there was frequent mentioning of Yemen. I looked at it and I saw some horrible pictures of the things that was happening there, but I didn't really understand the background of the history of the place. And the past few days it has been bothering me a lot. So I went and I started digging a bit. And this video is definitely not intended to be a reference document or something that can be used for historical references or what. I'm no historian. I'm just an observer, more than a casual observer. I'm a guy that tends to look at the details when I look at things. And I dug around to find some background, and I found two documents that gives a good summary of what's happening there. And I think this is what we need. We just need a little bit of background and an overview so that we can understand what is going on there and then form your own opinion. Now, the first document asks the question, where did the war begin? Yemen's war unfolded over several years, beginning with the Arab Spring in 2011. Pro-democracy protesters took the streets in a bid to force President Abed Allah Saleh to end his 33-year rule. He responded with economic concessions but refused to resign. Now, there is the core of the issue. 33-year rule. Now, any person with a little bit of common sense will immediately frown when you see a thing like that. 33-year rule. By March, tensions on the streets of the capital city, Sana'a, saw protesters dying at the hands of the military. One of Yemen's most prominent commanders backed the opposition, paving the way for deadly clashes between government troops and tribal militias. Thanks to an internationally brokered deal, Yemen finally saw a transfer of power in November to Vice President Abed Rabu Mansour Hadi, paving the way for elections in February, in which he was the only candidate. Hadi's attempt at constitutional and budget reform sparked an outcry by Houthi rebels from the north. Now, from what I gather, the Houthi rebels, as they call them, is the majority there. And, I mean, look at that farce. Election and he's the only candidate. And then the next question that is posed is, who is fighting whom? Multiple factions are entangled in Yemen's war. However, the conflict divides into two main categories: pro-government forces led by President Hadi and anti-government forces led by the Houthis, who are backed by former President Saleh. The Houthis hail from Yemen's north and belong to a small branch of Shiite Muslims known as Zaydis. Until summer 2015, the insurgents had infiltrated much of the country's south. They currently maintain control over the key central provinces in the north. Hadi's government has accused Iran of smuggling them with military arms, an accusation which Tehran has denied. Now, if you look at the intensity of the conflict there, and you look at how long it's been lasting, it's just obvious, common sense to ask, who is financing that war? Because Yemen, as such, is a very poor country, and we all know how much weapons cost and what it costs to finance a war. Then there's this document, the key players in the conflict. In March 2015, a Saudi-led coalition backed by the US intervened militarily in Yemen in a bid to fight the Houthis, restore President Abd Rabu Mansour Hadi's government, and reverse what they say is growing Iranian influence in the region. And there is the key. Saudi-led coalition backed by the US. I get so angry when I see these things. The US is forever involved in struggles like this, and they are there stoking the fires. But the real important thing to remember, as somebody once said, follow the money. Now, Nixon made a deal with the Saudis about protecting the house of Saud, and in exchange, the Saudis will sell their oil for dollars and park their profits and their reserves in US Treasury bonds. So in a nutshell, the Saudis bought the US military as their personal security. And that has been going on for a hell of a long time. So no color revolutions or Arab Springs or what in Saudi. Why? Because the US is protecting the house of Saud. And I'm not going to spend too much time discussing that issue because it makes me angry and I lose my sense of objectivity when I get angry like that. What is important, remember, the US backed Saudi-led coalition. And then there's a footnote in that also that you must take note of. Growing Iranian influence in the region. Now just mention the word Iran and the newcons in the shit house in Washington go ballistic. The armed group made international headlines after seizing control of Sara province in early 2014. They later moved southwards to seize the capital Sana'a, forcing Yemen's Hadi to flee his presidential palace in Aden for Saudi Arabia. Now, obviously, it seems to me, as an observer from South Africa, that the Houthi movement appears to me to be the majority. And it is important. That is the majority of their population. But the Saudis wanted that monarch that reigned for how long? 33 years. Keep him in power. Why? Obviously there are deals going on there that we don't know of, and that was not to the benefit of the population. Because if that ruler was looking out for his people, he wouldn't be something, I think, number 163 out of 188 countries as the poorest of them. I cannot understand this. How can the world just turn a blind eye to what the hell is going on there? Amid the instability, several other armed groups emerged, including Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, the UAE-backed separatist Southern Transitional Council, STC, and others. The Houthi movement, also known as Ansar Allah, are a movement of mostly Saudi Shia Muslims from northern Yemen who opposed Hadi's government and are believed to be supported by Iran. Years of UN-brokered peace talks have failed to break the deadlock. Obviously it will fail, because in the end, why would the majority that are against that ruler, why would they make that thing work? Because that Saudi-backed coalition has been sowing death and destruction on the people of Yemen. And then I get this, attacks on Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Over the years, Houthi rebels have targeted strategic infrastructure across Saudi Arabia and the UAE, including airports, gas fields and oil tankers in the Red Sea. In January, a Security Council report said the Houthis had violated the UN-imposed arms embargo and continue to source critical components for their weapon systems from companies in Europe and Asia using a complex network of intermediaries to obscure the chain of custody. And I have to shake my head. The Houthis, they are fighting for the freedom from that autocratic rule that is supported by the Saudis and financed by the Americans. This rebel group are fighting against that. and then there's an arms embargo on which the UN wants to make statements about against them. How's about embargoing that Americans that are pushing that weapons into the hands of the Saudis with which the Yemeni people are being terrorized? In recent weeks, tensions escalated as the Houthis started launching drone and missile attacks on the UAE, a member of the Saudi-led coalition. According to the data analysis by CSIS, Saudi Arabia's military has intercepted more than 4,000 Houthi missiles, drones and other standoff weapons during the past 5 years. In response, the coalition has stepped up attacks in Sara province, northern Yemen, and the Houthi-controlled capital Sana'a. This, when you read this, just does not make sense. How can a rebel group launch that many missiles and drones and things? Obviously they have support. And where do their support come from? Most probably from Iran, because America is supporting the Saudis and the UK. Don't forget that the UK is also supporting the Saudis in this fight against Yemen. The next graphic I'm going to show shows the key players in the conflict. In March 2015, Saudi-led coalition backed by the US intervened militarily in Yemen in a bid to fight the Houthis, restore Hadi's government, and reverse what they say is growing Iranian influence in the region. There you have it. Iranian influence must not grow. Iran does not have the right to support the Houthis. It's only the Americans and the British. They have the right to support the Saudis. This is where the shit in this world is starting. And if you look at that graphic again, who are the people that are with the Saudis? And it's the UAE, and then it shows France, Britain, America, and it's interesting. Gulf and other regional allies, many of them have left the coalition. I cannot explain how I feel about this sponsoring of wars. Why didn't they just leave the people of Yemen alone, let them sort their shit out, and get a ruler that the masses wants, not these installed powerhouses? On the next graphic, it just gives you an idea of who owns what. And if you look at that map, the green is the Houthi control. And they are now, let's call them now, the rebels as they want them to be known as. But look at that. They control the bulk of the population of Yemen. The rest part that is showed there in brown and khaki and so, that's sparsely populated. That's desert basically. But where the people are, the Houthis are in charge. And then we look at this graphic. Air raids on Yemen. The Saudi-led coalition has carried out more than 24,000 air raids since 2015, according to data collected by Yemen Data Project. Since 2015, human rights groups, Amnesty International, has investigated dozens of air attacks across Yemen and found many instances where civilians were killed with US-made bombs. 24,000 air raids against a small country, a small poor country, where the people that are supposed to defend themselves have most probably only got hand weapons. This is not right. If you look at this graphic, attacks on Saudi Arabia and the UAE, Yemen's Houthi rebels have launched several drone and missile attacks on targets across Saudi Arabia and the UAE. And then there's some details about the drones that they are using. And once again, common sense tells you those drones are coming from somewhere. They are definitely not made in Yemen by the Houthis. And then we look at this one. And here are many of your answers. Here are the driving force behind that atrocities that are being committed in Yemen. Middle East military spending. Saudi Arabia is the world's largest arm importer. In 2021, the kingdom spent more than $50 billion on its military. About half of the US arms transfers went to the Middle East. And then on the graphic, It shows which countries and the percentages they're buying from different countries. This is something that makes me sick. If the US focused on the US population and spend the money on industrial development to better the lives of the people of America, can you imagine where America would have been today? But there's only the selected group in the MIC that is making billions out of this military equipment and arms deals. And then this morning I saw this. Breaking. Joe Biden just sold $3.05 billion worth of American-made Patriot missiles and related equipment to Saudi Arabia so they can continue committing genocide in Yemen. Now, just for a moment, these Patriot systems are defensive systems. Why the hell do Saudi need that much? Who is attacking Saudi Arabia? And then this guy posted, it is also Americans who are providing the military logistics, the equipment maintenance and the satellite imagery that enables the Saudi-US war against the nearly defenseless Yemen. And then there's the guy that makes this remark. Oddly enough, there doesn't seem to be any desire to give weapons to Yemen to defend themselves. Apparently that is only for the white Ukrainian Nazis. And now I'm going to show you some images that are most probably going to be very disturbing, but you have to look at it. This is Yemen. These people be forgotten only because they don't have blue eyes and blonde hair. And if you look at that image, that is what the children look like in Yemen. How can any decent person look at this and have peace in himself if his government or her government is participating in spreading this misery? And then the last one is this one. Imagine that this is not a top news headline. 22 million. Yemen's humanitarian crisis is considered the worst in the world. The risk of famine could imperil 22 million people. And for me, the sad part is that the bulk of that people that will die is children. So, I hope this has given you a little bit of a better understanding of what is going on in Yemen, but most importantly, I hope it wakes you up, that you take note of what's going on there. And once again, America is a big player there. Think about that.